What if, in 1588, England had not only lost the battle, but had become part of Spain? Imagine, instead of drinking tea at 5, the British sip sangria, and the Tower of London is decorated with Spanish flags. Sounds like something from a parallel universe, right? But let's go back to 1588, when the Spanish Armada, the huge fleet of Philip II, set out to conquer England. In the real story, storms, English fire ships, and a little bit of luck on Elizabeth I's part stopped the Spaniards. But what if the weather had been on Spain's side and Philip II had landed his troops on the English shore? That year was a turning point. Spain was at the peak of its power, and England was a small but impudent island nation that irritated the Catholic world with its Protestant Queen Elizabeth I. Philip II, who considered himself a defender of Catholicism, dreamed of returning England to the fold of the Catholic Church and, of course, punishing Elizabeth for her pirates, such as Francis Drake, who plundered Spanish ships. But the Armada collapsed, and England began its journey to becoming a maritime superpower. But what if things had gone differently? What if Philip II, sitting in Madrid, had received the news of triumph rather than defeat? Maybe he would have even joked, "Well, Elizabeth, it's time to learn Spanish." This topic is fascinating because it makes you wonder, how could one naval battle have changed the fate of Europe? If Spain had conquered England, would Europe have remained Catholic? Would the Americas have been Spanish-speaking from Alaska to Argentina? And would we all be drinking sangria instead of espresso or tea? This is not just entertainment for history buffs, but also a chance to imagine a world where England is not the mistress of the seas but a province of Spain. What follows is a story that is hard to put down, with unexpected twists and turns, ironic moments, and questions that will make you think. So pour yourself a coffee, or maybe a sangria, and let's imagine how the Spanish Armada is changing the course of history. Let's go back to the summer of 1588. The Spanish Armada, called the Invincible, with 130 ships and 30,000 soldiers, sails to the shores of England. In real history, storms, fiery English ships, and tactical mistakes by the Spaniards ruined Philip II's plans. But in our alternate reality, the weather is favorable to the Spaniards. The sky is clear, the wind is favorable, and the Armada landed unhindered on the southern coast of England, in Kent. The Duke of Parma, who leads the ground forces, quickly captures key cities, and the English army, unprepared for such an offensive, is defeated. The first key moment, Elizabeth I is forced to flee. London falls in a few weeks, and Spanish troops enter the city to the sound of Catholic bells. Elizabeth, who in real history became a symbol of the English resistance, in our reality either flees to Scotland or is captured. Philip II appoints a new governor of England, possibly his daughter Isabella Clara Eugenia, who becomes the governor. Imagine the Spanish officials in London trying to pronounce the names of English towns, such as Worcestershire, and finally giving up and calling everything in Spanish, Londra, Yorks, and so on. The second point, England becomes Catholic. The Spanish Inquisition comes to the island, and the Protestant Church, which Elizabeth cherished so much, is banned. English Protestants either flee to Scotland and the Netherlands or convert to Catholicism to avoid persecution. Imagine, instead of English pubs with ale, there would be Catholic masses, and instead of Shakespeare writing Hamlet, Spanish playwrights like Lope de Vega would write plays for London theaters. Maybe we would read Don Quixote in English, but with a Spanish accent. Third point, Spain dominates Europe. Without England as a Protestant counterweight, Spain is strengthening its influence. The Netherlands, which in real history fought for independence from Spain, now has no support from England and is forced to submit. France, surrounded by Catholic states, is also forced to give in. The Huguenots lose support, and Catholicism becomes the only religion in Europe. Philip II, who in real history was losing influence after the Armada's defeat, now looks like the king of Europe. Imagine the Pope sending Philip a letter. "Well done, Philip. Even I didn't expect that." And now the most interesting thing, how does this affect the world? First of all, the colonization of America is completely different. Without England, which in real history founded colonies like Virginia and Massachusetts, Spain and Portugal dominate the New World. North America becomes Spanish-speaking. Imagine how, instead of English pilgrims on the Mayflower, Spanish conquistadors found Nuevo Madrid on the site of modern New York. English does not become the world language, and Spanish becomes even more dominant. Maybe we would all now say hola instead of hello. Second, without England as a maritime superpower, Spain controls trade in the sea. English pirates such as Francis Drake no longer terrorize Spanish galleons, and wealth from America flows uninterruptedly to Madrid. Spain invests this money in the development of science and technology. Perhaps Spanish engineers, not English, launched the Industrial Revolution. Just imagine, the first steam engine is not invented by Watt, but by a certain Don Pedro from Seville. Third, the political landscape is changing. Without English parliamentarism, which in real history has become an example for the world, democracy is developing more slowly. The Spanish monarchy, with its absolutism, dominates Europe, and the ideas of the Enlightenment, which in real history inspired revolutions, do not resonate as well. The French Revolution may never have happened because France remained a monarchy under pressure from Catholic Spain. Imagine, instead of liberty, equality, fraternity, it's obey the king and go to church. And what about culture? England, as a province of Spain, is losing its identity. Shakespeare, who in real history has become a symbol of English literature, either writes in Spanish or doesn't write at all. The Inquisition doesn't like such unreliables. English cuisine, which is already not famous for its sophistication, is becoming even more Spanish. Imagine the English eating paella instead of fish and chips. And the music? Instead of the Beatles in the 1960s, it was flamenco bands from Liverpool. How does this affect the present? Spain, having preserved its empire, is becoming the main superpower. The United States, if it appears at all, speaks Spanish and looks more like Latin America than the Anglo-Saxon world. English is not becoming a global language, and world culture revolves around Spanish traditions. Hollywood makes movies in Spanish, and the Oscars are called the Don Quixote Awards. The Cold War, if it is happening, looks like a confrontation between Spain and Russia, not between the US and the USSR, and maybe we would all be dancing flamenco at parties instead of rock and roll. So, what do we have in a world where the Spanish Armada conquered England? Europe is a Catholic continent where Spain rules the roost, and England is just a province that has forgotten about tea and learned to cook paella. America speaks Spanish from Alaska to Argentina, and democracy as we know it has not blossomed because the Spanish kings have a firm grip on power. Spain, not England, becomes the master of the seas, and the Industrial Revolution is launched in Seville, not Manchester. Imagine, we all watch Spanish-language series on Nuevoflix, and instead of the Beatles, we listen to flamenco rock from Liverpool. This alternative history makes us wonder, how could one battle in 1588 change everything? In reality, the Armada's defeat marked the beginning of the end of Spanish domination, and England soared to the top. But what if Philip II had won? Would we celebrate Columbus Day instead of Thanksgiving? Would we have worn sombreros instead of caps? And would London have been just Londres, a provincial town where everyone speaks with a Spanish accent? History is a web where one good win for the Armada could turn the whole world upside down. Maybe we should thank Elizabeth and the storms that saved England? Or, as the Spaniards would joke, if we didn't conquer England, we at least taught them how to cook something tastier than fish and chips. This story reminds us that even the largest empires can fall with a single setback, and that small countries can change the course of events if they are lucky with the weather. If you enjoyed imagining this Spanish world, please like it. It's like saying gracias to Elizabeth for her luck. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories about how history could have turned. Write in the comments what you would add to this world. Maybe a Spanish tower with a flamenco show? Let's figure out together how history could come back. See you in the next story.